All right, you guys, it is time again for another episode of my setup. And on this week's episode, we're going to be talking about a bait that I throw a lot out here on Okeechobee, and it's an episode you guys requested a lot from me. Everyone that I ran into uh, while fishing the Toyota series said they were waiting patiently for me to talk about my setup that I throw a swim jig on. So figured I would just knock this one out. It's pretty standard, I believe. It may be, I might do it a little bit different than a lot of other people, uh, out here just in Florida in general. But this is what works for me. Again, I can't say it enough. I'm not saying it's my way or no way. I mean, this is just what works for me on a daily basis while out on the water. So actually, I was kind of lazy and didn't feel like going out to my boat. So I just grabbed one of Breezy's rods and reels from the garage because we throw a swim jig on pretty much the exact same setup because when it comes down to it, she's kind of the one who taught me how to be as efficient and, as good with a swim jig as I am. I mean, she's very good with it. So I just grabbed her rod. So basically what we got is, it's kind of a standard for me. This is a 1/2 ounce arc swim jig. This is one of the new, I don't even know what color this is. It's some kind of brim pattern. But for the most part, I'd say 95% of the time, I throw a 1/2 ounce swim jig. Now, that might come as a surprise to a lot of people. I feel like most people think on Okeechobee, you're going to want to throw a 3/8 because we're in shallower water and things. But in my opinion, the 1/2 ounce is great because you could throw it a little further. It's a little heavier. And oftentimes when this bait excels is in the heavy winds. I really catch a lot more fish on this bait when it's blowing than when it's not. So that a little bit heavier weighted jig enables me to be more accurate and, just to throw the bait into the wind better. And also I feel like it just keeps the bait a little bit lower in the water. Now, if you're fishing like a white swim jig around the outside edge on a shad spawn or something, then yes, maybe a 3/8 to keep that bait up top where those fish are looking up may be more efficient. But for the most part, when I'm throwing this bait, I like a dark color, like a bluegill color. Traditionally, a black and blue is my favorite. And just throwing it out and just kind of keeping it lower in the water column for, I feel like those bigger bites come a little bit lower in the water. So 95% of the time, it's a 1/2 ounce for me. 65-pound braid. A lot of people throw it on 50. You could throw 50, you could throw 65. I just throw 65 on everything out here on the lake, besides like a top water, like a spook or something. My frogs, swim jig, big easy, flipping, everything is thrown on 65-pound Suffix braid. And then this is where it might get a little bit different from some other people. I don't know. This is a 7/6 medium heavy rod. Not a heavy, very important, a medium heavy. So a lot of people out here think you're throwing a heavy cover swim jig in the thick stuff. You need a really stiff rod. It's not necessarily the case, and I've explained this in a couple of my other videos. And the reason I don't throw a heavy is because you want something with a little bit of tip to it. When that fish gets that bait, you want it to load almost like a chatterbait, and you're letting them thump the bait, reel into them, let the rod load, and pulling into them. The difference is when I'm flipping, when I'm throwing a big easy or whatever, you're hitting that fish from a standstill position. And what I mean by that is, like, when I'm flipping, you make a flip to some reeds, you engage the reel and you lift. That fish has momentum going with it. That fish is already cruising, doing his thing. And when you set the hook, you're coming from a standstill. That fish has its momentum. He's already heading the way he's going to go. And, you need that heavy rod to turn his head, get him coming to you, and get him out of that thick stuff. Whereas with a swim jig, oftentimes you're making a long cast, you're reeling the bait. When that fish bites, your hand is already in rotation. You have momentum coming. That fish, you get the bite, you can almost reel into him and never stop turning the handle. So that medium heavy rod keeps that bait pinned in his mouth. It enables him to kind of load on the bait a little bit more, pins that hook in him, and you don't necessarily need that extra heavy rod because you've already got that fish coming to you from the second he hits the bait, if that makes sense. Same thing, like I said, with a big easy or a frog. When that fish eats it, there's that half-second hesitation where you're letting them take the bait. You're hitting them from a standstill. I like that heavier rod, but with this, it's just keeping that momentum coming. And what's cool is, you could traditionally, when they eat a swim jig on this setup, they're coming in the boat, in my opinion. I very rarely ever lose them. and that has to do with that giving them that second, that limber tip of that rod. And then you're owning them from the once they hit it and they go to turn their direction, you've already hit them. You got their head turned towards you, their momentum coming, and you could just wind the fish in. And with the 7.6 medium heavy rod, you could still boat flip that fish with ease or get them in the net. This is Breezy throws hers. I think this is a 6/8 to 1 reel. That's what I use, either a 6/8 or a 7 to 1 reel. You don't want anything too fast. Oftentimes, like I said, people are burning that swim jig. You want something with a little bit of speed. Like I said, a 7 to 1 reel to me is perfect, but you don't want it too fast. Just because you oftentimes fish the bait too fast. Being patient, just a slow, moderate retrieve with this bait, I feel like is not only going to get you more bites, but more importantly, it's going to get you bigger bites. This is, like I said, a 7.6 medium heavy. This is an arc reinforcer. I throw it on the arc invoker as well. And you could throw it on a 7.4. Some people like, a 7.2, a 7.4. Depending on where you're fishing around the country, a lot of people like that little bit shorter rod because they like to shake and twitch that swim jig as they're reeling it through the grass. We will do that sometimes from time to time here on Okeechobee. For the most part, it's just a long cast and just a slow or moderate, steady retrieve, consistent retrieve. And we like the 7.6 because A, it gives you a much longer cast. B, like I said, it gives you, most of the time, you get a rod that's 7'6". It's going to have a more moderate parabolic bend to it, which enables you to, pin that fish a little bit more. And then, also another reason is if you ever are throwing a swim jig in buggies or cattails and really tall grass, if you have to try and maneuver that fish around, you can get that rod tip up and get it over the grass as well. So that's what I throw it on. Again, 65-pound braid, pretty much all the time. A half-ounce swim jig. Like I said, this is the Arc one. I'm a big fan of these. If I had to pick another one, either the Gambler Goat swim jig or the Dirty Jigs No Jack swim jig, something with a very stout hook. And oftentimes it's just a very dark colored bait like this one. This is a bluegill pattern or black and blue. 65-pound test Suffix Performance braid. And that's about it. So that's what I throw it on. Oh, real quick, I didn't even talk about my trailer. It all depends. You could throw a crawl style trailer like a Gambler Mega Daddy, a Bruiser Crazy Craw, or a burner craw. A lot of people like the Zoom Speed craw, a Rage Menace, something like that. Or oftentimes down here, if we're in really thick cover, a lot of times we'll throw something, a paddle tail swim bait. And really the only one I ever use on there, and that is either a Gambler Easy Swimmer or a Gambler Little Easy. If I'm trying to target bigger fish, or I think those fish are on bigger forage, I'll throw the Easy Swimmer or the Big Easy. But 99% of the time when I'm throwing a swim bait profile bait on the back, it's a Gambler Little Easy. It's real small, it's compact, and that way it prevents you from getting short strikes on the swim jig. Sometimes they'll come up and grab the tail. That Little Easy fits perfect on the back of the jig, and they get the whole thing with that. So it's either that or I go to a crawl style bait. But that's really a confidence thing. It's whatever you prefer. I don't think either one works better than the other. It's just what's going to be more efficient and gives you more confidence. So that's about it. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll be happy to do my best to answer them for you guys. See you guys.